industry and various sets of people associated with the industry. SEEP, as you know, started in 1998 with various activities like fostering industry relationship with the government authorities. Over the period of time, SEEP has matured to various ventures. So apart from relationship, we actually talk to various set of peoples and kind of network with each other to ensure that SEEP is a good platform for interaction. Of late, SEEP has also been announced as the regional council of NASSCOM for Pune. So that's a feather in the cap for SEEP. So today, we actually have tie-up with Citibank, and Citibank has agreed to sponsor us for various set of lectures. So this is one of them. And I'm happy to say that Citibank has actually covered very interesting topics over the period of time. Again, today's topic is also very interesting. So people in the finance segment like me who kind of fear about all the currency fluctuations and the problems happening in this market, we have experts from Citibank who can actually address that. Can I call upon stage Anshumal Pandey, who's the regional head commercial banking with Citibank. He's based in Mumbai, but he's come all the way from Mumbai to Pune to address this particular topic. Welcome, Anshumal.
Thank you so much for your kind words. First of all, let me clarify. I'm sorry, just one second. I think I have to fix my laptop again.
Check. Hello.
First of all, let me clarify. This is not a lecture. Rather, I want it to be as interactive as possible. We are trying to cover a couple of things here. Currency market. Yeah. That's fine. We'll try to cover currency markets, hedging tools, and financing solutions for the software industry. The idea is basically to take you through what all is available as product in the banking bouquet across banks, and I will not just be talking about Citi in particular, but in general, overall, whatever is available in the market, and how it can be of help to you as a, when you look at it as your business, right? To begin with, I'll cover currency markets first. This is broadly what I would want to cover: microeconomic overview, hedging products, Citi business overview. That is what all we do as a bank in this space and how it can be of value to you. And lastly, I would obviously want to summarize. While I've been given a long slot, I don't think it will take that long. But yes, if we talk, if we communicate, and if we ask questions, then it certainly may take that long. To begin with, the most interesting part of our business is the foreign exchange. And when I say our business, it means our business has bank and your business has software, because I don't think any software industry works without a foreign exchange exposure, right? I mean, almost everything that gets produced gets exported. So foreign exchange is an integral part of this industry, and therefore it becomes all the more important that we understand this piece of the business as well. Now, while there's a lot which is written on the left hand side of the slide, but if you look at the figure on the right, that's precisely what is the state of the economy as of today globally. Just to cover a few points, the global economy is now interlinked, and unlike pre-94, wherein we were isolated and were not affected by anything going around anywhere in the world, as of now, we as a country and rest of the world also gets affected with anything happening in one part of the globe. we have, and this has been evident with the very recent issues that Eurozone has been facing. We know what all is going on in Greece and how it has impacted the Eurozone, the levels at which Euro is today, where all it has been to. I have seen Euro going to as high as 71 and as low as 54. And that's primarily to do with a specific part of the Eurozone which has been giving trouble to everyone, or rather has been a concern of everyone. US has been showing mixed signs of late. We are expecting, I mean, rather it was extremely slow, and there were problems with US. Now, a very recent communication by the Fed chief has given indications that there might be a QE3 coming out, which obviously means that there will be more quantitative easing happening, and that may in turn result in increased liquidity in the system, and that can impact both ways to the various economies in the world. Japan was hard hit by not just tsunami, but also a very strong currency. We have seen JPY coming to, and if I remember correctly, JPY went to as high as 71 against dollar, and it's currently at 78. We might see further strengthening of JPY, and if that happens, then we will probably see the Bank of Japan intervening to make sure that there's no further strengthening happening. And why it is so is that if JPY strengthens, Japan is primarily a country which is majorly into exports. So if the current currency appreciates, then the exporters see loss. Geopolitical concerns, Iran, now Syria, and you don't know what may be coming up next. So that is another part, and which directly impacts the global economy. Markets have displayed heightened uncertainty, similar to what we had seen in 2008 and 2009. India, if you look at, there are multiple issues. You have falling rupee, you have the scams just don't seem to stop. With the very latest one, the Colgate, which is all over the place, high interest rates and still inflation, no new policy, or rather I would say lack of reforms, and above all, high current account deficit. And the biggest question that the central banks are facing globally is to choose between inflation or growth. Specific to India, again, you try to depict by this picture what is actually happening. We have seen INR continuously weakening. If you see last year at the same time, dollar was around 44 against the rupee, and today it's somewhere 55.20, 55.30, right? So that's almost about 28 to 30% appreciation on dollar, or that much of depreciation in rupee. Inflation just doesn't seem to come in control, and that's a primary concern of RBI. Industrial growth is stagnating. Currency volatility persists. We have even seen up to 3.5% of fluctuation intraday of late. Not in the last few weeks, I would say, but we have seen that also happening. So that hasn't helped, because see, it's not about whether a currency is appreciating or depreciating or going down. It's more important at how stable it is against a particular currency. So if you know that it's going to go down, or if you know it's going to go up, still better than not knowing about it. So which way it might turn on a particular day, you don't know, and that is what creates uncertainty, and that is what creates the risk. Scams I spoke about. We all know the risk rating agencies have downgraded the rating of India, and that again hasn't helped with the political inertia. This is basically a graph which shows from 2000. This is right from 2004 to 2013. How has the dollar moved? And I think we've seen a 39 in 2008, and from 39 we have seen a 57. Our foreign exchange reserves had started depleting from $300 billion in 2008 downwards. It saw 275, 254, and then some recovery with 284 and 288 billion. Now the RBI is trying to strengthen this position. However, if we continue to see the currency fluctuation, and if we continue to see a strong dollar, then the RBI might have to come again into the market, and which obviously means that it will bring down our foreign exchange reserve as well. Most of the other things I think I have talked about. Drought figures are coming true, so that's one thing. And the revised growth rate, which was around 7, in the range of 7, it has come down to a 5.6. A few points on some major currencies. Europe, Eurozone in particular, Greece elections, we are expected to get some clarity on the position of Greece, but it was all short term. To add to that, we have also started seeing stress in Italy and Spain. Credit rating of Eurozone has gone down. The credit rating actually of the entire Eurozone has been a concern. Some of the politicians in Germany have actually of late commented on whether Greece should actually be a part of Eurozone or not, and it is not a remote possibility that we might see Greece exiting Eurozone completely, probably somewhere around the beginning of next year. So that's also a possibility, and so on and so forth. So Euro remains a uncertain currency. While after the statement came out, there was appreciation about 300 basis points in Euro against dollar last week, but it could not hold on to it, and again there was a further fall by about 200 basis points. GBP is again, it's more or less similar to Euro. Apart from that, the growth is an issue in UK, and which is also reflecting in the currency performance. Bank of England may continue to go with the QE measures to ensure that they are able to in some ways show some improvement or some stability in their economy. JPY I spoke about earlier also. Tsunami and earthquake have given them a big shock, but apart from that, the currency appreciation is a bigger issue they face today. Political scenario is fragile. Interest rates are as low as 0.1%. Earning concerns of major Japanese corporate houses is an issue, and central bank has to intervene every time when they see it breaking a certain level. So as I said, it's at 78, 79, if it goes towards a 77 or a 76, then you might see a bank of BOJ coming in. The other interesting currency here is Australian dollar. Now, I don't know how many of us here would have exposure in Australian dollar, but Australian dollar has been one of the majorly traded currencies and has seen more appreciation than dollar in the recent times. In fact, AUD went up to a 58 plus, and we have started seeing some weakening in AUD now, and it's primarily to do with the fact that AUD is a commodity currency. So as long as the commodities are hot, then this currency and some of the other currencies like CHF, the Swiss franc, will also continue to see appreciation. However, with the commodities cooling down a bit, and the other fact that the largest consumer of commodity is China, and we are seeing some slowdown in China as well, which is why we expect that AUD may also cool off a bit from here. And that's one reason why the Central Bank of Australia is cutting down on the interest rate to ensure that they are able to keep up to it. Now, when you look at all these scenarios, I don't think there is any currency that I spoke about when we see any kind of a certainty or any kind of an indication that where a currency may go. And that puts, as an exporter, whether you're a software exporter or you're an exporter of goods, it puts you in a lot of doubt in terms of what one should do. Typically, I mean, an ideal scenario is when you're getting an order and you're getting paid for it at the same time. But normally in the international trade, it doesn't work that way. So there's always a credit period or a time period involved. So when you raise an invoice, you probably end up getting paid after, unless it's a parent-subsidiary relationship, you normally get paid after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever may be the terms of credit between the buyer and the seller, right? In such a scenario, you take an order which is, let's say today at 55.22, and you are expected to get money after 90 days. So how can one be sure as to when you actually realize the proceeds of this invoice, whether you will get the same exchange rate? Is there a solution? The answer is yes, there are solutions available. Has any of you sitting here do you have any experience of any kind of hedging that you have been doing for your existing business as of now? Any exposure into hedging? Fine. Yes, the solutions are there. We'll come to this slide a little later. The solution is you can look at two products which ensure or which help you protect the levels at which you may want to get your bills realized, and they are forwards and options. Now, before we go on to that, I would actually want to emphasize on this slide. I think this is the most important slide of this entire presentation. This basically covers the factors that you should look at when you decide that you would want to hedge, and this should actually be the basis on which you should decide whether you should take a position, you should not take a position, to what extent you should take a position. So there are 5 factors here, and I would want to cover and spend some time on each one of them. First and foremost, clear understanding and objective. Now, when you say hedge basically means protect. I mean, if I look at the word in isolation, it basically means protect, right? So when you're hedging, what are you doing? You're trying to protect yourself against an expected risk. And what is the risk? The risk is the uncertainty, right? So clear understanding of the objective. So the objective has to be extremely clear, that when you are talking about hedging, you're actually talking about protection and protection only. By the virtue of hedging, you may at times get into a situation wherein you might be able to make some extra money out of it. But as far as objective is concerned, it has to be absolutely clear that when you are when you are evaluating a situation in terms of hedging, you are talking about protecting yourself. You are thinking about protecting yourself. So that objective has to be absolutely clear. The second important consideration should be the budgeted levels. Now, when I say budgeted levels, it may differ from for each individual sitting here, because budgeted levels are something that is the level at which you would have given a quote at the time when you have taken an order, right? So, while you may have started negotiating with the buyer at the time when it was 50, and by the time you got the order it was 55. However, your negotiated levels are at 50. So for you, for this particular transaction, your budgeted levels would ideally be 50. What is the situation today? Today dollar is 55. So is it better than your budgeted levels? The answer is yes. So should you hedge at this level? Yes. What if you negotiated at 55, or let's say you negotiated at 57? It was 57 recently, right? So what if you negotiated at 57, and by the time you got the order, it has come to 55? Should you hedge? No. What if it goes down to 53? So it's a tricky situation, right? So budgeted levels is an important consideration. Now, how to look at it, we'll discuss that. But having said it, it's important that one should know what is the budgeted level. You may want to hedge in this situation also as an arrangement of stop loss. So in the first place, you are hedging when you are way above your budgeted level. So you are hedging at a level which is in the money. So you are comfortably placed. You are sure. I calculated at 50, today it's 55. I am hedging at 55. I need not be worried whether the dollar will go up or the dollar will go down. I am safe and secure at 55. If it goes to 59, I don't care. Because I am already making more than what I thought. On the other hand, when you have given a quote at 57 and the dollar has come to 55, what it should actually means is that there is a stress on the profit margin. Now the question one needs to ask is, do I need to keep the risk open and wait for 57 to happen so that I can hedge? Or should I do a stop loss so that I make sure that if it goes down from here, I don't lose more money? Because initially it may only be stress on profit. It can subsequently come to complete erosion of profit and maybe loss. Right? So budgeted levels are In case you have any questions, please feel free to stop me in between.
So, wouldn't this depend on whether you're importing or exporting?
Yes, it will.
It will, right?
Right. So,
What your levels are.
right. So, if you are an importer, then obviously if it is going down, it's beneficial to you. So, exporter will hedge in a situation wherein he wants to ensure that he is getting the money what he is quoted for. An importer would hedge to ensure that he is not paying more than what he is calculated for. Right? Third is obviously the spot and the premium. So the level at which the currency is at the time when you are looking to hedge. Very again critical. You may take an order at 55 and may want to wait for a 56 to come. You can again, it depends on the strategy. You might want to say fine, I am okay, I am comfortably placed. It doesn't seem that the dollar will go down to 54. So I'll keep it open at 55, but if it touches 56, I'll hedge. Can be a strategy. I want to make sure that if there is a possibility of 56, then I would want to secure my position there. I don't care after that it goes to 57 or a 58. Actually, what happens is when it actually goes to 56, you want to wait for 57. Correct. And when that happens, that is when you start losing money. There are two things in a forward contract. One is a spot, the other is a premium. You would want me to elaborate on that? Okay. Spot, it's an old terminology. Spot is primarily something, if in literal terms, spot is something which used to be used in good old days for conversions, because spot is a rate which is supposed to be valid for 48 hours. So when the process was not online and when you take the rate from the treasury, then the documentation will go and then they would typically give a rate which would be valid for 48 hours. In today's scenario where everything is online, actual usage of spot is not there. It is only used for the hedging purpose. Otherwise, the rate that you take from the treasuries is a cash rate. But for all other purposes like forwards or options, what they refer to is the spot rate. So one is the spot rate. The second part is the premium. What is the premium? Premium is the incremental amount that you pay or get when you hedge in the form of a forward contract. So typically, if you are looking at hedging, and we'll take an example, but when you're looking at hedging, 3 months hedge would mean today's spot and 3 months premium put together is what an exporter gets as a rate. So if 1 rupee is the 3 months premium and today's spot is 55, what you get is a 56. For an importer, the premium has to be paid. So exporter gets the premium, importer pays the premium. So an importer will have, if assuming that the spot is same and it's an import payment, then an importer will get a protection at 56 and not 55. Spot and premium. So the fourth important thing, the underlying and the tenor. So for taking when you hedge, you are actually taking a position on a currency for a particular day in future, right? So there has to be an underlying, a valid underlying. As I said in the beginning, a clear understanding of the objective. The objective is to hedge. When you are hedging to protect yourself from currency fluctuation, you need to ensure that you have a underlying for that. RBI and the authorized dealer will only allow you to hedge provided you have an underlying. What can be the underlying? There can be two types of underlying. One is the actual order, or you may get an LC, or an order, or an invoice that you might be raising which has a date of payment. So all these things can be underlying documents. Alternatively, there is something else also available which is called as a PPC, a past performance certificate, which is issued by the chartered accountant, which talks about the last 3 years volumes on imports and exports, and basis that also the authorized dealer can allocate a limit up to which you can take a position, that is you can hedge. So there are two different types of underlyings. One is the actual underlying and the other is a PPC. You can either hedge under PPC or you can hedge under an underlying. And secondly, the tenor. So if you are using an underlying, then obviously whatever is the due date on the underlying document. If it is the 90 days LC, then you can only hedge for 90 days or less. If it is similarly for an order, if the order has the payment to come up, payment term is 90 days or 60 days, then that is the tenor for which you can hedge, and the date has to be specific to that. But if you are booking it under a BPC, and you are aware of your flows, then you can choose any date of the month or tenor to hedge. The difference being, if for some reason you need to cancel it, you will not be able to do it for something which is done under a BPC, but you will certainly be able to do a cancellation for a hedge which has been done with an underlying. And fourth most important thing, risk appetite. So how much is the risk appetite one has? So you may have a $1 million outstanding, but whether you would want to take a position on that entire $1 million is something which depends on the risk appetite. Why we are talking about risk appetite is because this product, forward in particular, has some risk. It is, while it gives you protection, but it is not 100% secure. And we will talk about it when we take the example. So what is a forward contract? Forward is a contract with the bank to buy or sell a specific currency and amount against another currency at a predetermined exchange rate and on an agreed future date. So it has two things. One is predetermined exchange rate and second is agreed future date. Now, what is more important here is it is an obligation on both the parties. So if you get into a forward contract, that means that you on the due date have to deliver or buy. Deliver means if you are an exporter you will deliver, if you are an importer you will buy. So you have to honor that contract on that particular day. Can the bank say no? No, the bank also cannot say no. So it's an obligation on both the parties. If either of the two parties backs out, any loss incurring because of that is to be borne by the party which backs out. It's available in all major currency pairs. It's a protection from foreign exchange and market volatility. However, there is a potential loss due to unfavorable movement in the currency market. How there is a potential loss? Booked at 56, dollar moves to 59. $1 million contract. Potential losses, if it moves to 59, 2 million rupees is the potential loss. Correct? Let's look at this example. As an exporter is booked a forward contract at a spot of 54, at a forward rate of 54, wherein the spot was 53 and the premium was 1 rupee. Correct? 5 months. So we are in August and he has booked it for December, January. January is the time when he has to deliver. $1 million at 54. So if he delivers $1 million on, let's say, 30th of January or 31st of January, he will get a rate of 54. Now let's review what all scenarios can happen. An early utilization. $200,000 out of this 1 million, the client gets in September. Now, knowing that this is a part of this $1 million order which he has taken and for which the money was expected after 5 months, what can he do? Should he keep it in the EFC and wait for, one option is obviously that he can keep this money in the EFC and wait for 4 months, and after 4 months when the actual day of delivery comes, he can deliver that and get a 54. Alternatively, he can also deliver it today or in September when he is getting the money. He can deliver it on that day. That will be considered as a pre-delivery. Now what will the bank do? Will they give you 54? No, obviously not, because you've got 5 months premium. You've got 5 months premium and you're delivering in the second month itself. So just after 30 days you want to pre-deliver $200,000. So what will the bank do? Bank will take back the premium of 4 months. So assuming, and this is only for calculation, but assuming that you've got a 20 paisa per month premium, what will bank do? Bank will take away 80 paisa and give you 53.20. But this will not be the exact calculation, because the day you want to pre-deliver, on that day, bank will see what is 4 months premium, and that is the amount that will be taken back from the contract value. So if the premiums have appreciated, one might have a little bit of loss. If the premiums have remained same, because premiums are not so volatile. While we have seen premium from 2008 to 2012 moving from 1.16 for 12 months to a 3.35 now. It's tripled, but still it's not as volatile. So this is what will happen. Okay, before we go on to the next piece, why is there a premium? Why do we have a premium in place? Anybody can take it. Anybody would want to try?
That's the risk the bank is taking. So it's like an insurance premium.
No, I'm afraid not. Any other thought? No. See, what you're doing, we go to the first point. When you're booking a forward, you're selling $1 million. Let's look at the literal transaction, what's happening. You're booking a forward contract for $1 million for 5 months. What you're actually doing is you are selling $1 million, which you don't have right now. It will come after 5 months. But you are selling it today. At what rate? 54. 54 is the agreed price. Let's forget about premium and everything. 54 is the agreed price. So, what you have done is, you have sold off your $1 million and have bought 54 lakh rupees or 5.5 crore rupees. Right? So, on the day one, you are not left with $1 million. What you have is a 5.5 crore rupee. Right? Now, when will you get that money? 5 months from now. When will I get dollar? 5 months from now, right? Now, if you look at the interest rate of the two currencies, how much is the dollar in interest rate? 1%, right? So, I'll get a currency after 5 months which has an interest rate of 1%. I'll give you the currency after 5 months for which the interest rate is how much? 12% may not be the case, but at least around 9%, right? 9, let's say 10%. So, you are going to wait for, I'm assuming you have dollar today, but you are ready to wait for 5 months to give me, to give me those dollars and take rupee from me. So, there should be some incentive for it, because there is an interest rate differential. So, it's basically this interest rate differential which gives the premium. While it may not be 100% true in the Indian scenario, because there are multiple factors, like I mentioned in the beginning when we are talking about the various currencies. So there are multiple factors which affect the currency, but if the situation was ideal, then the only difference would have been the interest rate differential, which would have resulted in the premium. Now there are multiple factors, and therefore the premiums may not be precisely equivalent to the interest rate. And I mean, we also go by sentiments and various news, political news, stability, this and that. So all that adds up to the fluctuating premium. But the basic logic is that it is the interest rate differential between the two. And therefore an exporter gets premium and an importer pays premium. Because look at it in the reverse direction. The bank is going to sell dollars and take rupee on a future date. So therefore, there is a premium which the importer is going to pay. Okay. So the concept of premium is clear? Fine. Let's go to the second part, cancellation. Now, after 2 months, the client realizes that out of that $1 million, only half of it is to be actually supplied, whatever may be the goods or the services that he might be supplying. So he is not going to get paid for that $500,000, while he has taken up a position for $1 million. What will he do? He'll have to call up the bank and tell them, boss, I'm not going to deliver $1 million, I'm only going to deliver $500,000, out of which I have already delivered $200,000. So please help me with a solution. Bank will say, fine, you do a cancellation. What is actually a cancellation? cancellation, I mean, this is actually, you can't actually cancel a contract. What is literally done is that there is a reverse contract done. So there will be a reverse contract done on that specific day. Here you sold dollar and bought rupee. You'll have to get into a reverse transaction. And that may have a net profit or loss. So a cancellation can result into a loss as well. And ideally both are to be borne by the customer. 24 December 2011, RBI came out with a regulation that in case there is a forward contract book which is to be cancelled, and if the client is in the money, he cannot retain the profit. So 24 December 2011, and after that about 70% of the forward volumes dropped in the next 2 to 3 days. The idea was, I mean, the regulator's idea was obviously to bring down the speculation which might have been happening, and obviously there was speculation going on, which is why there were so high volumes. Now there is some further clarification which have come out, and depending on the currency pair that you are into and the underlying document that has been used. So if it is a PPC, then you will still not get the profit. However, if it is under an underlying, there is some consideration there. Third point, customer receives $200,000 and 100 on the due date. So 500 is gone, 200 is gone. So what is the remaining outstanding for the 5th month? It is $300,000. Out of that, he only received 200,000. As his buyer requested him for a further credit of some time for the remaining $100,000. So he delivers $200,000 at the agreed rate, and for the remaining $100,000 he does a rollover. So these are typically the 4 scenarios that may happen in a forward contract. Forward contract we spoke about, we have covered the scenarios, you've understood premium, and we have spoken about obligation. So is it a good proposition? Is it a good proposition? Should one use forward contracts? Beg your pardon?
Not always.
Not always. Okay. So at times when you feel it is a suitable level, right? Okay. Now there is also something else available. First, let me clarify. In a forward contract, there is no charge that the bank would ideally charge you. So if whatever is the spot plus premium is what you get or you pay, but there is no cost of booking a forward contract. While as a bank is taking a credit risk on the client when they are allowing a client to book a forward contract. So therefore, bank may want some collateral in the form of either fixed deposits, or bank may choose to take the financials and do a credit underwriting and create a line for allowing the client to book forward contracts. These are the 2 different possibilities. Now the risk, there is one more risk which I think I should cover before we move on to the next, and that is when currencies start moving against your protection level. What happens then? While yes, there is a potential opportunity loss. So if it moves from, you're booked at 55, and if it moves to 56, obviously you're losing 1 rupee. And if it is a $1 million contract, then you're losing 1 million rupee, right? Apart from that, what is also happening is that the collateral that you might have given, there's an erosion happening on that collateral. While the money is intact in the fixed deposit, it also continues to earn interest the way it should. But along with that, when the currency will move, if the bank is supposed to maintain 10%, right, the bank is supposed to maintain 10%. Now, when dollar is moved by a rupee and it's $1 million, so you have kept $100,000 with the bank, equivalent rupee INR, so 5.5 lakh rupees, 55 lakh rupees is what might be with the bank as fixed deposit. Now, if the currency moves by a rupee, this margin also erodes. Why it erodes is because your 1 million is no more 1 million, it is now 54 lakh rupees. Or if it is 55, it is 5.5 crore rupees. Now, if dollar becomes 56, right? So you're only left with 55 lakh rupees, but the $1 million which the bank is supposed to get is at 56 lakhs. So there is an erosion happening on the margin. And there may be a situation, and it actually happened of late when it moved from a 45, 46, 47 level to a 52, 53, 54 level, and the bank will ask you to give more deposits. And that is the second potential risk which is there in a forward contract. This can also happen in case when the bank is giving you lines. Because if the lines are fully utilized, and after that there is erosion of this kind, then, and the bank has when there is no more risk appetite to take further exposure, then the bank will say, please give me more fixed deposit alternatively. While your lines are here, but the lines are fully utilized, in fact they are over utilization, and therefore you need to make up by giving me additional deposits. So there are two risks. One risk is potential loss, the other risk is margin erosion risk, wherein you might at times have to pull out money to keep it in fixed deposit, which may come out of your working capital. And this can be, this can be as high as twice or sometimes 3 times of the deposit that you might have given. So therefore, at times you may not want to look at forwards as a suitable hedging solution. In such a scenario, is there an alternative? Yes, the alternative is there, and that alternative is called option. If you look at this, I don't like forward because it restricts me to enjoy the favorable market movement. So two things happening. One is the margin erosion, and the second is it also is not allowing you, while it is giving protection, but it is not allowing you to take the market favorable market movement advantage. Right? So then there is an alternative product which is called as an option. And as the name suggests, it is an option. The first one, forward contract, it's an obligation. Second one, it's an option. Now, what exactly is an option? A currency option is a financial contract which gives the buyer or the holder the right but not the obligation to exchange a specific amount of currency versus another at a specific rate or up to a specified date. As an exporter, what option you will take? You will take an option where you will buy a right to sell. Correct. As an exporter, you will always be selling. You will buy a right to sell, which is called a put option. Now, what does this actually means? This is, if I may put it in very, very simple terms, this is nothing but an insurance. You are buying a right. You are buying a right to sell your dollar at 55 or at 56 or at 57, whatever may be suitable. But it is not an obligation. So, if the dollar is, if you bought an option at 55, a strike price of 55, that means on the agreed date, if you come to the bank and say, here is my $1 million or $100,000, please give me a rate of 55, irrespective of what is the rate of the currency, the bank has an obligation. Bank has an obligation to give you the dollar at 55. But you don't have an obligation on the bank to deliver the dollar at 55. So it's just a right. And this is more of an insurance. So when you take insurance, what happens? You pay a premium. Correct. So unlike a forward contract where we are saying that there is no cost, here there is a cost, and this cost is upfront. So what actually happens is you buy protection, and you buy protection upfront at a price. The advantage is the downside is protected, but the upside remains open. So if it goes below 55, you can sell at 55. If it is above 55, you have the option of taking the market rate. Correct? So give me an example. This is an exporter's example. Spot rate is 56, 1 million receivable 5 months from now, 100 paisa premium for 5 months. Hence the forward rate is 57. spot 56 and 1 rupee premium. So if you take a forward, same example, but the spots have changed. So if the spot is 56 and the premium is 1 rupee, you would get an option at a price of 57. Now, first scenario, you get 57 rupees instead of the market offer of 54. So the market has gone down to 54. You have protection at 57. So you get 57. 3 million rupee better than the market. Right? Second scenario, market is at 59. You're off by $2. That is 2 million rupees. Notional loss though, because I'm sure you have looked at the budgeted levels. However, there is a opportunity which is lost. Now, if the same example you would have hedged by option and not by forward, what would have happened? At 54, you would exercise the option at 57, and you would have made 3 million, same as forward. But if it was 59, you would have also enjoyed incremental 200,000. And at what price? At a price of approximately $20,000 upfront paid. Now this 20,000, this may not be the right price. It will differ from time to time. So the duration at which you are looking to hedge, the strike price you may want. But in a forward contract, it is as simple as that. Today this is the spot and this is the premium. So for this tenor, this is the rate you can get. In an option, you also get a choice to decide the protection level you want. You are at 55, spot is 55, you may want to hedge at 55, which is current spot, you will get a different premium. You may want to hedge at 56, so you want protection at 56 and not at 55, you might pay a little extra premium for that. You may choose to take a protection at a level lower than today's spot. I want protection at 54. So I am okay if the market goes down, I will still get 54. Right? So something like the first scenario we spoke about. You calculated 50, $55. You can choose to take out of the money option also. Right? So the premium of the cost of the option will go down. Because you are taking something which is even lower than today's spot rate. So this premium may differ depending on what? Depending on the strike price that you may want and the tenor you may want. There is one more difference. Forwards you can only book up to a maximum period of 12 months. Option gives you the flexibility to look beyond 12 months also. So options.
Basically, in scenario 1, you would get 30 lakhs minus.
Yes, you will be 30 lakhs
approximately
max. Yes.
minus 11 lakhs approximately.
Yeah, whatever is the premium you have paid, that has already gone upfront.
So 20,000 at the rate of 55 is,
Right.
that's what.
But then, see, the upfront payment only ensures that the downside is 100% protected, while upside remains open. So therefore, there is a cost to it.
Yeah.
It's mentioned opportunity benefit at the cost of $20,000. Now, this is more from an academic perspective. There are certain terms and conditions under which only this scenario can actually be exercised. So there are clause, and again, I think last year, 2 years back, RBI came out with that you need to have a certain amount of net worth and a certain amount of turnover, and especially accounting norm to be able to look at something like this, which we'll talk about now. But from an understanding perspective, since we are talking about hedging, I thought it will be prudent to explain one of the scenarios. This is basically called option wherein there is zero cost. So there is no premium which is being paid. Now, how it works out is, as I said, as an exporter you will always buy a put, a right to sell. And what was happening in a plain vanilla option was that you had protection from downside and 100% upside open. Correct. Here, what is happening is that the downside is getting protected and the upside is also getting restricted. So we are saying that you buy a put at 55. So your strike price is 55 for the option that you are buying. And you sell a call. Sell a call is the reverse So you sell a call to the bank at 58. Please stop me in case there's any question in between. But basically, you're saying that you're buying a right to sell, and the other is you're selling a right to buy to the bank. So you buy a right to sell at 55, and you sell a right to bank to buy from you at 58. If you look at the scenario, I think it will be a little more clearer. So US dollar has depreciated to 50. You have taken protection at 55. It has depreciated to 50. What will happen? You will execute your option and take a 55. Correct? The bank will not exercise its right that you have sold. Correct? Why will they buy from you at 58 when in the market dollar is available at 50? The second scenario is when the dollar is 56. Now at 56, your protection is at 55, so you would obviously not want to exercise it. You take the market rate. Bank has a right to buy from you at 58. So bank will say its market rate is 56, I am not interested. So both the parties, the client and the bank, don't execute their option. It expires. There can be a third scenario wherein dollar has gone to 59. At 59, you don't have a choice, right? Because it is outside the range of the option that has been created. So your option of 55 is obviously not there. Anyway, you would not want to take it 55 when the dollar is 59, right? But the bank will now exercise their option and will ask you to sell at 58. Correct? So this is typically how a zero cost structure works. There can be more permutations and combinations to this. This is just for example, and there are multiple options, but this has to be in a specific space over a particular turnover. So this may not be relevant to everyone at this point of time. However, I thought I will just take one example quickly to touch upon it. Any doubts? Any questions here? We move ahead. Let's talk about, these are some of the first few things that Citi as a bank has been, yes ma'am?
Why would anyone opt for a forward contract when these options are?
Ma'am, because forward contracts come without any cost, and the options you have to pay a cost, which is obviously getting minus from your exchange rate.
So what is options if actually the rate is 56 and I have the options at 55 and I still buy at 55, do I need to pay?
Actually, ma'am, option, when you buy an option, you pay upfront. So at the time when you take an option, you pay at that point of time. So when you get into an option, you don't know what will happen to dollar, right? I am giving you a right today to exercise for, let's say, next month, next 3 months, next 6 months, next 1 year, next 2 years. So for the next 2 years, I am giving you a right to buy dollar at 55 from me, irrespective of the market rate. So
You
for
always have to,
beg your pardon, ma'am?
I mean in any case you always have to pay when you buy.
In an option, you have to always pay, unless you fit into the zero cost structure option. You always have to pay. It has to be paid upfront. So the day you get into the contract with the bank, that day the account gets debited, the bank will charge a premium. And this premium may not always be the bank's earning, because there is a cost of volatility involved, and that the trader has to incorporate in the option premium. And more volatile the currency is, the higher will be the premium for you. Yes sir, you're saying something? Okay, fine. So the more volatile it is, the higher will be the premium. If the premiums come down, we see stability for some time in a specific currency, and then you may want to take an option in that particular currency, then the premium may also drop considerably. But if that scenario arises, you may not want to look at an option at that point of time. Correct? Okay, couple of things before we move on to the next piece. We discuss options, we discuss forwards. I told you what can be the potential risk in booking a forward contract and what can be an indicative cost in taking an option. The question still remains is whether you should do an option or forward or a combination, or for that one still needs to have a strategy, a clear-cut, well-defined strategy as to what you want to do with the business, how much you need to hedge, and that is something that probably as a business one needs to decide that okay, these are my flows, this is how it looks like for the next year. This much percentage of my total flows is what I would ideally want to have protection on. We certainly don't recommend 100% protection. If you have been hedging, then you would obviously have a strategy in place. If you have not been hedging, a 20-25% is a good percentage to start with. And it is not all necessary that if you are getting an option, if you, let's say you have $1 million monthly receivables, it's not necessary that you have to hedge the entire 1 million in a single contract. You can break it up also. So you are saying that okay, I want to hedge, I would be happy if I get a 55.50, but dollar is currently at 55.20. Now, rather than all waiting for a 55.50 to come, what ideally one should do is, and let's say in a $1 million you might want to hedge $300,000 for the next month. So you may want to break it up into smaller contracts of $20,000, $50,000, whatever is convenient. See, the other risk is when you're booking a forward contract is you have to also ensure that the money comes in. Irrespective of what rate you have booked, if the money for any reason is not coming in, then there is a cancellation which is staring into the face, and that cancellation may or may not be in the money. Correct? So the strategy has to be very clear. 100% hedging we don't recommend. Again, basis your flows and the certainty that one might have, you can decide how much you may want to hedge. Ideally, one should first do a few contracts only to understand how it works, because irrespective of how well I explain here or somebody else comes and explain, unless you experience it, I mean the feel factor will not come. So the strategy needs to be worked out, figured out how much, what percentage out, and then once you're clear on that, then you can then take a call, okay, I want to do option or I want to do forward. In more volatile times, that is of late, we have observed as bank that there are more people who want to look at paid options rather than forwards. Because of the fact that people hedge at 45, 46, 47, and then they not only had notional losses, but they also were out of the money, and therefore that also meant stress on the working capital, because the money which goes out towards these fixed deposits and it gets lien marked, so it's not available for use, is also going out from the same business. So you've seen a trend wherein people have started looking at options also. Earlier the percentage was probably 90% into forwards and 10% into options, but now that percentage is certainly looking far better than that. And that is because now people have realized that it's better to pay upfront and be secure. Because forward, while yes, you are protecting a particular level, but to some extent you are still taking a position. Okay, I feel that 56 is a good level, or the dollar may not go beyond that, so this is a good level, I should take protection on this. After which, if your call goes wrong, notional plus the margin call. So, whether to take forwards or options or a combination, that is a strategy that needs to be worked out. You can probably sit with the person who actually advises you on from your bank, or if you want, you can get in touch with our people here in Pune, and they can actually first they'll have to obviously understand the flows, and then they can tell you, they can give the recommendations after understanding the flows and the strategy that you might have in place, and then probably they can do a recommendation, and then it's up to you to decide how you would want to look at it. These are some of the first things that Citi came out with, which includes, when we were the pioneers in CMS, I think what is more relevant here is the World Money Card, which I'll talk about. Delhi Metro card, a transit card which Citi introduced, and we still have a fairly large chunk of the SME banking with us. Now, I'll also take a few more minutes and cover what Citi as a bank can do in this space, and this is specifically more relevant to the IT space. We have our banking structure based on these 5 things broadly. A team of specialists, which means the relationship manager and the service relationship manager who are dedicated to the account, and this is coupled with a specialist. For example, in Pune, Rahul, who's sitting with you all, is the specialist for Pune. So he is the one, I mean, your relationship manager is the pivot who actually comes back with a solution for everything that you might put across. There are certain things that he himself will be able to resolve, there are certain things wherein he'll need a specialist. So as and when required, he'll get the relevant specialist coming in. Rahul is the commercial bank specialist or the Citi business specialist for rest of Maharashtra. We also have his counterparts on investment and insurance solutions as well. So a team of specialists, product expertise and innovation, transaction banking and CMS are some of the things that we introduced into the market. Trade finance services, again, while may not be too relevant here, but we do have a complete shop which basically caters to a very large population, not just in India but outside as well to a lot of countries. Foreign exchange services and commercial loans. Citi's network, obviously if you have international business, you can leverage about 160 countries is where we operate in, and we have relations with about 6,500 banks globally. So that can actually help you understand your client, which, I mean, you know, if you are getting into a relationship with a new client and you want to understand, if you know his bank, we can probably tell you how good the bank is, or you know which bank he's banking with and what level it is at. Global network, obviously, then you have the service levels, so 24/7 you have the online services available, and apart from that the tax solutions are also there. There's one more thing which is not here. Of late, the BRC issuance, which again I'm sure here it's more of soft text, but BRC issuance, I should mention here that BRC issuance is something which has been now made mandatory online. It's no more submitting the entire set of documents to the bank to get a BRC issuance done. So it's more of e-BRC, and Citi is the only foreign bank to be a part of the 18 banks which are able to offer e-BRC as of now. And we have solutions on the other side as well, which means personal banking, wealth management, Citi at Work. Citi at Work is our salary proposition, and consumer assets, so which includes, not car loans, we are not into car loans anymore, but mortgage, property loans, personal loans and credit cards. Again, I think this is more or less covered in the previous slide. I'll talk about a few things here. Comprehensive and best in the class product offering. Inward remittances as an exporter, if you have already, unless your banking is a foreign bank, typically all the Indian banks would ideally be using a foreign bank as correspondent bank for the remittances to come in. The reason is there is something called as a Nostro account, which is used for getting the foreign remittances into India. Now the advantage in Citi is that we have our own Nostros in most of the countries. So one is the intermediary bank is not there, so obviously the charges also go off. The second thing is that the remittance comes faster. So if it hits my Nostro now, I can actually give the credit by afternoon today. While we still say, we still maintain that it's 48 hours from the time the wire is done, but actually it can be as fast as that as well. So we would, unless a wire message is lost, which can happen in the cable room, but otherwise we would not say that it has come to our New York office and then it will come to our Bombay office and then it will come to our Pune office and then we will be able to credit to your account. So it's the moment I cite it in my Nostro in US for $1, I can actually pick it up from there and credit it into the EFC or the current account, whatever may be relevant. Spot forward and derivatives I spoke about. Foreign currency check collection is also something we do. We can do it faster than most of the other banks. in case you have clients who pay you by check. Ideally it's avoidable, but just in case. Multiple currency EFC accounts. We offer EFC accounts in 12 different currencies, and we have just added one more, which is ruble. So Russia is one of the large trade partners for India, and we thought it might make sense to have a ruble option as well. So all major currencies we will be able to help for EFC accounts. I think it's the widest spectrum of EFC accounts that any bank offers. Foreign currency check, draft, and obviously the World Money Card. I am not particularly taking this up because I will talk about it a little later. Foreign exchange forwards I have spoken about. Hedging solutions I have told you. Access to expert views. You have a specialist based out locally, and you also give access to our dealers in the dealing room. So just in case at any point of time you are either sitting on some large balances in EFC that you might want to convert, you can always call us up and take a view. Or alternatively, you may want to book a Tom also, that's also possible. This is more related to trade, so I would not cover it here. This is the product I was talking about, the World Money Card. This is basically a travel card when you are traveling abroad, or your employees who travel abroad. This is far safer than carrying cash. It's a preloaded card. It can be directly loaded from the EFC. Citi was the first to offer it. I am aware that there are multiple replicas also available, but because of our network, the kind of services that are offered here are far superior than what you might get. For example, you obviously are able to do a quick transfer. You can directly load it through the EFC account, so there is no foreign exchange. It can be, if the balances on the card are over, it can be immediately reloaded sitting here in India, so you need not do a wire transfer, and there is some protection in terms of emergency card replacement and emergency cash as well, and 24-hour toll-free helpline for US and 32 other countries. And it is a customized MIS to do the analysis, so the individual may need not be worried about the expense details. They're directly sent to the company account as well, and monthly statement the individual for claims, and it can be 14 million visas globally is the access point. And it's available in 6 different currencies. Again, may not be the case for a lot of other people or other banks offering this product. While US and Euro is something which will be easily available but for the rest of the currencies it may not be easy. And once you come back, you can always get the money back. The other solutions, there's one piece which I actually wanted to speak about. As exporters, working capital is something, just in case you may want to look at. Working capital is something that we also do in this space, and I'm talking about foreign currency loans. So there's something called as PCFC, packing credit in foreign currency, which in case of this industry is available for post shipment. All of us are aware of the interest rate. We spoke about it some time back. So if you're currently using a CC, it typically works out at somewhere in the north of 12%. Against that, as an exporter, you can always avail packing credit, which is the LIBOR denominated working capital facility, and it can be L plus 300 basis points or so. So there's normally, the reference LIBOR is 6 months, which will be typically around 0.5, 0.56 or so. So the effective interest rate on that piece may only be 3.5%, vis-a-vis a 12% plus on the CC. There's one more product which has actually been very, very popular, and some of our clients swear by it, is the Citi FX Pulse. It is basically a product which enables you to fix the currency rates sitting in your office without having to make any call to anyone, including your relationship manager or your dealing room. So this is something which gives you access with a unique ID in your office, you can fix up the rate. You can track 24 different currency pairs. Specific currency pair that you may want to track. It has 3 different screens and they give you multiple inputs in terms of what is going on in the global economy and various data points and how are they expected to impact the currency as per Citi's view. It's a awarded platform at the Asia Pacific level. It's the best of its kind. And that's what the allocate that we have got in the market. It's real-time spot FX. You can also do forwards on it. And while swaps are not available in this phase as of now, but that functionality is also available. In case you meet Rahul or Vikram, my teammates here, in your office they can actually give you a demo through their own IDs. So you'll actually get to see how it works. It actually makes the life very easy because you need not be worried, and you can have it open for all the trading hours. In the morning at 9 o'clock from when the trading starts up to 4:30, it's available on screen quotes, and when you actually take a quote, it is valid for 3 minutes. It allows you a 3-minute time to decide whether you want to do a trade at that rate or not. And subsequently you can take a quote again. There's only one condition, that in case you are using FX Pulse and you have fixed the rate once, you cannot cancel it. We should get the documents well in time to be able to execute that transaction on that day. Otherwise, by the end of the day, we need to square up the transaction, which can be a loss also, because if you've sold dollars and then I don't get dollars from you, then I need to square up the transaction. Because you sold to me, I would have sold in the market. I need to pay to that guy, whosoever I sold him to. I'll have to buy dollars from the market at that rate, and in which case it may not be always in favor. So in FX Pulse case, any loss due to cancellation is to be borne by the client. The profit is to be retained by the bank. The idea is not to penalize anyone, but to ensure that there is discipline around it, because there is a lot at stake. It allows you to do transactions up to $1 million. So this is, please call us up for a demo for this, just in case you would want to have a look at it. That's about it. I think I have covered all. Softtech is one more thing that we have tie-up for, wherein we can actually help you process your entire software completely. It is an outsourced agency, but obviously with responsibility on the Citi side. And this reduces a lot of your headache, because right from filing of Softtechs to STPI certification, everything is taken care end to end, and your bills get regularized. That's about it. We have solutions at the salary level, which is called Citi at Work, or Suvidha. Erstwhile names was Suvidha. People who have banked with us would know about this, and there are different level of offerings. So right from payroll management to Citigroup Suvidha Premium and normal Suvidha accounts. Similarly, we have offerings on the wealth side as well. I am actually not the right authority to be talking about wealth, but this is what we have. We do profiling, and then on the basis of the profiling, the recommendations are made. We have solutions on the retail asset side as well. I spoke about retail assets, home loans, property power loan, which is obviously loan against property, and then you have personal loans as well, and wealth offering in terms of mutual funds and market linked deposits. This is a proprietary offering from Citi, which is structured products, which again you'll have to get somebody else to talk over it. Just got it included to mention that we have this here, and we also offer life insurance and non-life, wherein health, forever and travel is offered. So that's it from my side. I'm open to questions.
What are the current premium being charged for the forward contract?
See, currently 1 year premium is 3.35 on dollar.
And similarly for the cost of option,
So there are multiple factors to it. A 1 year option, and I'm telling you, I checked for somebody. So a 1 year option on the spot, and the spot on that day was around 55, 46 or so. It was working out to some $22,000 for a year. Now the same contract will differ if it is an out of the money contract and if it is at 56. So, it's very difficult to quote for an option. It again depends on the kind of volatility and the tenor you are taking it. If you are taking a 1 year option, it may differ, and if you are taking a 6 months option, it may differ. So, but then if you actually have clarity on the strike price and the tenor, we can actually help you with the quotes. You can get in touch with Rahul. He will be able to connect you with a derivative dealer. So we have different dealers for spot and forward, and you would have different dealers for derivatives. Yes, sir.
Other than forward and option contracts, are there any other ways in which foreign currencies?
Sir, with the bank, as of now, no. One can look at it, that's more of a speculation platform. We can also go to exchange and do it. There is a currency exchange available which allows you to take positions without an underlying. But that's more of a speculation platform. I would not recommend when you want to look at your business receivables on that platform. But that is one of the options available. While not hedging can also be a strategy. Some of the people who would have not hedged their exports in the last 1 year would have benefited a lot. So as I said, it has to be a combination. How much you should hedge, what percent you should not hedge, because keeping it open also, even when you've covered some part in options, some part in forward, you should ideally still have something open for a market opportunity. You never know. Or you can have a clarity of thought, okay, fine, at this level, as long as I'm getting this level, I'll keep this much open, but if I see it going down, I'll have a stop loss at this level. So 56 is what you want to have, but if it comes to 55, then you would want to do a stop loss at 55. That can also be a strategy. Or you may choose to keep it open. If it is a long tenor one, that you may expect that the money and that the levels may come back. Possibly.
I'm sure you'll have more questions. We can take them offline in the interest of time. Thanks, Anshumal, for sparing your time and sharing knowledge on this complex subject, as well as market is so volatile that we have to really relook at most of these aspects. Now, Citibank as the SEEP associate member would available to members for their advice and help. So I suggest, we can have more sessions like this on this platform. So on behalf of SEEP, small gift of appreciation to Anshumal for sparing this time and sharing a valuable knowledge. Thank you, and see you at the next breakfast meeting.